right, hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Saturday, July 2nd, 2022. It's your daily tropical update. We have a new player in the Atlantic Basin here this morning, a surprise storm, if you will, just in time for the holiday weekend. We have Tropical Storm Colin off the coast of South Carolina. This system spun up yesterday afternoon and evening, and the Hurricane Center went ahead and upgraded this at 5 a.m. to Tropical Storm Colin. So we have this little disturbance off the coast of the Carolinas. This was not covered yesterday in the video at all. I'm not even going to try to lie to you. This was not on many people's radar. It was a surface trough that sort of drifted north from the Bahamas, geez, and sort of just was sitting kind of like half on shore of Florida, half offshore, and then it kind of curled up through Georgia, and then it snuck just offshore, and a little low-level center formed, which kind of held together over those warm Gulf Stream waters, and boom, Tropical Storm Colin forms. So we have our third named storm of the 2022 season, just a few hours after we had Bonnie spin up yesterday. Bonnie today moving through Central America, just about to pop off the coast of Nicaragua and move off into the eastern Pacific Basin. We also have this other wave we've been tracking in the Caribbean Sea. Not expecting much development out of this one. So we got a few things to talk about in the Atlantic this morning, guys. So again, 5 a.m. or 8 a.m. rather, map from the National Hurricane Center showing Colin off the coast there. 40 mile an hour maximum sustained winds moving to the northeast 7 or 8 miles an hour. We'll start with him. And this is your satellite presentation of the storm. The center of Colin actually probably just offshore of South Carolina this morning, maybe right here near Myrtle Beach, where it's sort of kind of half on, half off. Visible satellite imagery does show that circulation center. You can see the winds kind of rotating inward. Right here, so your circulation center, probably somewhere in here. Heavy convection well offshore. It's a very asymmetric, sheared tropical cyclone. This is not very well put together by any means, but it is, in fact, a tropical cyclone nonetheless. We had this vortex, again, it kind of popped off the coast yesterday early afternoon around southern South Carolina, and it kind of one vortex kind of spun up under some convection, and then like a second one kind of popped out, and then the second one sort of anchored as it moved northward, and it held together. Hurricane Center put a 10% chance of development on it at 2 p.m. yesterday. They upgraded a little bit at 8 p.m. when their second overnight advisory comes out, and then just kept holding together. And after 18 hours, if you've got a low-level center vortex producing consistent anchored organized thunderstorm activity, you have a tropical cyclone on your hands. And we, in fact, did. Hurricane Center did the right thing. They went ahead and upgraded it. Um, Again, this is something that the forecast communication process that always has to be tweaked, because this is kind of more what a potential tropical cyclone label would have been for. So they could have set precautionary watches or warnings for parts of the South Carolina coastline earlier than they actually did. Um, Whereas, like with Bonnie, you had the storm for like 4 or 5 days. I don't think that was ever what the nomenclature was intended to convey. So we've got this little uh, kind of mess up with how we're doing this right now, but it's going to get figured out. But regardless of, we do have Tropical Storm Colin again this morning. This is the latest National Hurricane Center as of 8 a.m. Again, 40 mile an hour winds moving to the northeast, 8 miles an hour. And again, most of the heavy weather this morning actually offshore a little bit. This is the radar and satellite overlay. Again, the center of Colin, somewhere right in here, just tucked in around the coastline. But you see all the heavy weather streaming northward. This is going to move on into parts of North Carolina throughout the day, where most of the impacts tonight and tomorrow will be in coastal North Carolina. Not so much for South Carolina. Again, you have more drier air filtering on the backside of the storm. And most of the heavy winds are going to be associated with these rain bands and squall lines that do move ashore. So tropical storm warnings do stay in effect right now from Modesto Beach, South Carolina. It covers Myrtle all the way up through most of North Carolina and the Outer Banks up to the adorably named Duck, North Carolina. Hurricane Center, again, the track showing the system mostly hanging out near the coastline or just ashore. So not expecting intensification between that wind shear dry air and proximity to land is going to limit this, but it is still going to pull in that heavy weather off the coast. Excuse me. And it's going to move northward. Should be getting offshore by Sunday afternoon, where most of the impacts will be ending, as again that backside of the storm not very organized. So most of the heavy weather will be this afternoon and tonight across North Carolina. Sorry about your barbecues. And this is going to move off and get quickly absorbed by a much larger cold front. We can see back here across the northeast and central eastern U.S. moving southward. This is going to pick Colin up and absorb it, and that'll be the end of Colin's very short reign of terror for the eastern U.S. But again, a storm that popped up kind of quickly, and guys, this is something that happens. Small vortexes, small storms do pop up sometimes. So just, you always got to be on your toes this time of year. You never know when something might pop up. But again, no major impacts with this. We will see localized flash flooding. We will see minor coastal flooding with that deep southerly flow, and we will see sporadic power outages, mostly across coastal North Carolina. Again, closer to the coast you are, better chance you have for those winds to knock out power and cause a little bit of damage, but overall not the most significant storm in eastern North Carolina history by any stretch, but one nonetheless. All right, let's go ahead and look at Bonnie here this morning, crossing Nicaragua down there way to our south, and this system, boy, they're glad that this thing didn't get its act together until too late last night, because as Bonnie approached yesterday evening, the landfall was shortly after 11 p.m. Eastern time, came in right there about southern Nicaragua, Costa Rica border. This thing was getting itself together really fast. I mean, it dropped. The pressure was falling at about 4 millibars an hour, which is a pretty impressive rate of deepening. The system had closed a partial eye wall off, and if it had another 8-12 hours, this would have been a hurricane, and it may have been a significant hurricane if it had another 24 hours. Like if it had started this process a day earlier as it left South America, it would have probably been a pretty strong hurricane. So thankfully, June climatology or early July climatology was on our side with this one, because this would have been a bad hit for parts of Nicaragua and Costa Rica, who, remember, in 2020 took two direct hits from Category 4 hurricanes back to back within about 3 weeks with Iota and I think Eta or Theta, Beta. There was two Greek storms at the end of that season that just absolutely just blasted this region hard. So they're still recovering from that. Thankfully, Bonnie moved through pretty fast. Tweet here from Felipe Poppin, hurricane specialist at the National Hurricane Center, showing us the radar from Nicaragua this morning. You see the center of the storm right here, moving over that big lake. Forgot the actual name of the lake. Lake Nicaragua, actually. Thanks for the reading the tweet explains the tweet. This little guy moves offshore and will be out in the Eastern Pacific Basin, where for the second time on record we will have, since 2000 anyway, a storm crossing the Atlantic into the Pacific and keeping its name. Again, the Hurricane Center is considering this still a tropical storm, still a coherent closed low tropical storm. So when this moves off into the Eastern Pacific, it will still be Bonnie, even though we've already had the B storm in the Eastern Pacific. It'll keep Bonnie as its name. Only the second time this has happened since the year 2000, when we changed the naming conventions for something like this. Otto was the other one in 2015 or 16, one of the two. So it doesn't happen very often, but Bonnie will continue for several days, and this part of the Eastern Pacific is very warm, very light wind shear, so intensification is expected, and by early on Tuesday, we are expecting Bonnie to become a hurricane and probably stay a hurricane for a couple days until it eventually works off and finds colder water and more stable air off in the Eastern Pacific Basin away from land. But again, all the model guidance tracks that this will stay away from Mexico enough to not cause any direct impacts. And again, that intensity model is all showing a pretty decent hurricane out of this. Some like the ship's model pushing this into major hurricane status. Could be our first major hurricane potentially of the season in either basin. Other than that, guys, not much else going on in the Atlantic Basin. This little wave here, we've talked about it a decent bit the last 2 days. Just this little wave moving through the Eastern Caribbean. This thing has really no chance to develop. If you see it on the overall satellite, it's this guy right here. There's some pretty strong upper level winds. You can't see them very well, but like you see these cirrus clouds moving quickly off this way. These little clouds right here indicating there's a strong upper trough, and you've got a little bit of the outflow from Bonnie. And this is going to get wrecked by pretty good wind shear aloft. You've got the strong trade winds below, upper winds aloft. Going to be a lot of directional shear, and some overall dry or stable air out in the Caribbean is not going to let this one develop. It doesn't appear. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll watch it move through. Sometimes these waves can run silently for a few more days and then pop up in better conditions, but definitely not a direct threat right now. And then finally, we'll go across to the Pacific Basin, where we don't have anything in the Eastern Pacific outside of Bonnie moving in today. And in the Western Pacific, Typhoon Chaba made landfall yesterday in China. A tornado outbreak actually looks like it happened. Several tornadoes were reported across parts of South China. Heavy rainfall. That's going to linger for a couple days and continue to exacerbate flooding concerns. And we also have Tropical Storm Aere, which is moving through the islands of Japan today and will move through for several more days. Expected to stay fairly weak, though, just about 50, 60 miles an hour. But it'll kind of curve through and just make the full tour of Japan. It's going to pretty much hit every major city and island, but overall not too much in the way of wind, just a lot of rain and dreary, wet weather expected for them. All right, guys, what I got you for today on your tropical update. Again, Colin's gonna rain out some barbecues in North Carolina and maybe knock out a little bit of power, but it should be up and out of here by Sunday evening. Bonnie's gonna move out and just go out there and spin around and do our own thing in the middle of nowhere. This wave's not developing. And after that, guys, the tropics look like they are going to quiet back down. We are not expecting much activity in the first half of July. At least the next several days are going to be quiet. Nothing coming off of Africa. Not a lot of weather patterns to suggest in the short term that we'll have anything so much to watch. You're overall talking about a more quiet background state of the atmosphere in the first half of July. Your Kelvin waves, your MJO index are all going to be more suppressed as we go into this phase. So likely going back into that low period for tropical activity, and then probably second half of July, early August, this is going to pick back up. So we'll see how it plays out. But anyway, guys, what I got for you today on your topical update. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.